Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. This is Rob. Hope everybody's having a good new year. And I've taken a couple weeks off, I guess, since my last video. This video today, I'm going to start what's going to be a two-part kind of video subject, covering a subject. And the subject is stereo width, which is something that a lot of producers out there think is very important, and it is very important. Creating that sound stage, and it's really what it comes down to is it's just mixing, all right? And then also stereo widening. So stereo width and stereo widening are not exactly the same things, and I'm going to go over that with you. So I've kind of put together this project, and so let's give it a listen and then we'll talk about it. And I also forgot to tell you that there is absolutely no reverb added to this project. So it may sound kind of strange to you. I don't know if you were already thinking that. So let's continue here. Okay, so there we are. Actually, this is a project that I produced about 3 years ago, I think now, and it's one that I've always wanted to flesh out because before this point, I think it was just like an 8-bar loop idea. So one of the things that is important to realize about this topic of stereo width and stereo widening is that there are a lot of different factors and a lot of different distinctions that I've learned along the way and that I think producers should be aware of. And there are several different things that I pay attention to as I'm getting to the point where, okay, I got the song idea, it's fleshed out. Normally I would add a lot of reverb, but for the purposes of these videos, I left it all off so I can more easily demonstrate what I'm talking about, okay? And that is the first thing that I take into account is the source, all right? Now, what do I mean by that? Now, here's the kick stack. I have a kick here. What I'm looking for is, what is the source? Is it mono? Is it stereo? All right. Is it a good sound? Can it be turned up without breaking? Is it going to turned up without distorting and drowning everybody else elements out? And so what I do is, obviously the kick is going to be mono. You can hear that the kick is mono. And I've got this kick. I have this kick adjusted to where I like it. It's got a nice click, nice top. And so I can analyze it. And you can see it's mono, all right? Now the click may have a little bit of stereo information here. Let's just confirm that here. All right, so, but it's pretty much right down the middle. All right. And then so what I do is I just go through here and I just decide, okay, what do I have here? Okay, here's the clap. So I've got a little bit of stereo spread there. And then I just keep going and there's a second layer to the clap, and I may do something to that. I may take and put different treatment of this top clap as opposed to the main clap. And then I have the reverse clap. So the main thing that I do is I go in and I find out what I'm dealing with, and I already know what I'm dealing with here. All right, I've got some loops here. A lot of these are pretty mono. All right, then I've got like this, that's a shaker. Yeah, I gotta label that shaker. That's kind of right down the middle, but I may want to change that, all right? So then I've got a top loop here that's got a little bit of a ghost of a clap in there also. And that's pretty stereo, okay? And then I've got the bass, and let me play the bass. There's a top bass and a bottom bass. So what this really is if I were to turn the EQ off here, it sounds the same. But this has got a sidechain on it. So what I've basically done is I took the same bass, I created two identical channels, and I rolled off all the lows. I cut away all the lows on this one, and I'm not going to sidechain the top. And now let's just listen to this. That's pretty wide. And I don't need to sidechain that because that's not going to fight with the kick, because I've got it cut everything below 210 hertz, all right? But the bottom, that's definitely going to fight with the kick. And there's another, and as you can see here, let me turn the sidechain. Well, I never did turn the sidechain off, did I? Okay. And as you can see here, I've added a little bit of a boost there, and I've cut it away, everything above 210 hertz. And then I've sidechained that. But listen to this. That's also pretty wide. So I may not want to have everything from 200 hertz and below spread out like that. In fact, I definitely don't. And then like right here, I've got a breakdown bass. That's pretty wide, but during the breakdown, I may want it wide. In fact, I think I do want it wide. Then I have kind of the main pluck. All right, so let's listen to the pluck. So here's the point I'm making. This pluck is really wide and big. All right. Let's get it back so the filter closes. All right, so if you look here, the stereo is turned up on all the parts here. The stereo is turned way up. So if I were to turn all these down, let's compare here. If I were to turn all these down, let me just copy this. If I were to turn the stereo width all the way down, now that's mono. So you've got, when I look through all of my parts, I just have to honestly assess, okay, do I want this that wide? And on this one, have a tendency, I'm leaning more toward being wide than not, okay? Let's just paste that, okay? All right, and that has implications for during the mix, all right? So, and then these pads, they're kind of mono. There's two of them here. That one's kind of wide. And then that one's kind of right down the middle. Got an albino. It's right down the middle because I turned the chorus off, and we'll get to that later. In fact, later on, I am going to share my top 5 stereo widening techniques. Okay, so stick around for that. And then so what I basically do is I go through here and I find out what's stereo, where everything's at. All right, so, and the reason I'm emphasizing this is because the point that I'm trying to get across is you've got to know where you're at, because you can't have everything stereo, and then you obviously don't want everything mono either. If everything's stereo, then there's no contrast, and that's the second point. Or actually, that's the third point that I want to make. The second point is, are the elements in your track or this track filling out the spectrum? So let's go back over here, and let's play it, and open up an analyzer here. Let's open up a couple analyzers here, and let's check out the spectrum, and then we can also check out the, let's go like this. Let's layer it like that. Let's just play it. You know, and you can see it kind of fills out the spectrum fairly well. And then it already sounds fairly big because of that. We've got a pretty good track to work with here. And one of the reasons that it sounds kind of big already, as opposed to small, is that when I arranged this track, I made sure that I had specific frequencies filling specific roles in different types of elements, so that they're not going to be fighting with each other and they're not going to be masking each other. So that's why everything, you can hear everything. So it's important to pick out, it's important to pay attention to what you're doing in terms of the frequency spectrum. And then going back to the first point, point 3 is contrast. The first point that I made was you got to see what you have. How many elements do you have are in mono? How many elements are in stereo? And then later on, then you start thinking about contrast. What parts of this track do I want to be further back in the mix? And with the use of reverb and EQ, you can push things back. And what do I want to just use reverb as an effect and just have them big and euphoric? What elements do I want to give that treatment to? What elements do I want to have up front? What do I want to have left? What do I want to have right? And so you have to, I always do anyways, focus on contrast, because that's what makes a track sound big, is because the individual elements are allowed to fulfill their own, they live in their own space, and they're allowed to be the best they can be, and they're not having to fight with something, another sound right on top of it, you know, fighting for space in the mix. And so that is really, as far as I'm concerned, contrast is really, as I've grown as a producer, and that's what this channel is about, by the way, is my journey learning and growing and sharing my experiences as a music producer. Contrast is really important, and one of the ways that you can achieve contrast is with EQ also. It's not just reverb, it's not just panning left and right, but it's also EQ, and it's also, like I said before, frequency. If you have everything's spread out in its own frequency, and everything in its own place, living in its own place, and you can hear everything. The track is going to sound big because of the fact that there is contrast and the track can breathe. And so that's why I say when I put this track together, the only real problem here that I can see is that this sound right here is really big. And let's pull up the analyzer and you can see, now let's pull up this one here. You can see in the frequency spectrum, it really takes up a lot of room. It is a big, wide sound. So there are ways to deal with that. And one of them is reverb, one of them is EQ. And then also another one of them is just making sure that you don't have everything playing at the same time, even though right here I kind of did. But there are also other little tricks that you can allow each one of these other elements over here, you know, like the piano that I have playing, and then I got the pad, and then I got these vocals. Obviously these vocals are very dry, so let me play these here. Over here. So you can see that there's a contrast there, but there's also movement within that pluck sound. The pluck filters down and then it builds up for a short period of time, so you're kind of giving it to the audience. I'm giving the pluck sound to the audience when it opens up for effect, then it shuts back down. So that's where the contrast comes in. So it's filtering, it's EQ, there's all sorts of little tricks for making a track sound big so that you can hear everything and have everything in its place on the soundstage. All right, and then panning is another way of doing things. And what I want to do is just start right now with the subject of panning, is show you a little trick here. Earlier I had this shaker here, and let's just listen to that in isolation. It's right down the middle. Okay, and so one of the things you can do, and this is called the Haas effect. It's a way of panning things hard left and hard right, but there's a problem when you do that. Let me show you here. Quickly copy everything straight down. And I'm going to go here. I'm going to pan this one here, hard left. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to pan this one here, hard right. But funny thing will happen. It'll just get louder. You won't hear any difference in the stereo image because these are identical. So what you have to do is you have to delay one of them. So what you can do here is just go up to region controls, and you can delay one track a few ticks. This top one, we're going to delay the top one. And now you'll get that stereo spread. And that is called the Haas effect. So that's one technique that I use, which is, it's basically a ultra short delay. Let me take this back to 0 here. And then I'll start spreading it out here. Okay. So that's going to fill out. It's very subtle. It's going to fill out along with this one here, this top loop. Very, very subtle, okay? Now, another thing that I could do is with these pads, I can take and pan them hard left and hard right, because they're really similar, all right? But there is enough of a difference to where it will open up the sound. So that's an obvious obviously if you pan things left and right, you're going to get a bigger sounding stereo image. But these pads also, you can add reverb to them, and you can add delay. So I've got a couple of, I've got some auxiliary channels here. I've got some sends, effects sends. I've got a short delay, which is the Haas effect that I just showed you, except it's done with a plugin. Let me show you that here. It's done with a sample delay where I'm delaying the right against the left. Okay. Then I have a long delay, which is an echo boy, where I've got a quarter note delay on the left and a dotted quarter on the right. And I got it set to, this is the ping, this is the pong. And then I have it set to the beats per minute of the track. So let's add that. Let's turn that, let me toggle that off and then we'll add it here. So you're getting a more ethereal sound. Another thing that I could do is add some reverb. And I've got a long reverb. This definitely would qualify, in my judgment, to something that you would want to add to send to a long reverb. And this one actually has a chorus on it that I was kind of playing around with. And I have some filtering done here to the reverb. Everything below, let's bring this up a little bit to at quite a bit. Everything below 200, 300 hertz. Let's make it about 325 hertz. And this one was cut, yeah, that's about right, 5K. So let's just play that. Let's add a little reverb to that. Okay, so what we have here is, if I just taken, this is where we started, then go back and pan everything again. I want to pan it quite a bit. Not afraid to pan anymore, because again, you want contrast. If it's panned quite a bit, then there's your contrast, as opposed to things in the middle. If you pan it a little bit, then it's going to be fighting still a little bit with the things in the middle, with the elements in the middle. So don't be afraid to do that. Now, you can see how far away that sounds. It sounds way off in the distance. And that's because I have some filtering done here. I have it filtered all the way down, the actual sound itself, down to 700, everything above 730 hertz right there. So I bring it down to make it sound, push it way back during the breakdown. That's another way to create depth, is to roll off the highs. And then another one of my favorite ways to add stereo width is to put a chorus on here. And my favorite chorus, and we're now down to the vocals here, one of the vocal chops here, is this towel chorus. And let's put it here, turn the volume down a little bit. And you can actually have both buttons put in here. But it gets kind of radical. You start doing that. And you combine that with the pads. All right, and obviously, one thing I don't think I did tell you this track is essentially not even mixed that much. There is some mixing done to because I kind of wanted to see how things potentialized, but it doesn't have a full proper mix yet. So, okay, and so chorus is another way to achieve stereo widening. But again, this all has to be done in the context of stereo width in your mix. You don't want everything to be wide, because because you have to have contrast with things in mono or down the middle or what have you. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. And then another technique would be mid-side EQ. And one of my favorite, there's several different mid-side EQ plugins or techniques or technologies, let's call it. Now, so we already have, now mid-side EQ will only work if there's already stereo information, right? So we've created the stereo information here, even though this file already has some stereo information. A little bit, but it is more down the middle as compared to when I turn the chorus on. But if you really wanted to widen out, I'm just using this as an example. One of my favorite mid-side plugins is Waves Center. And all that mid-side is that you have the sides, which are information, it's the stereo information. The left side and the right side don't match, so they call that the difference. And the center is all the information in the signal that is identical. It's exactly the same. So what I do is, and I'm going to kind of exaggerate it here, is turn down the center, and that'll make it just sound big and wide. Okay, and then so when I add the center back slowly, now I'll turn down the sides. Okay, so you can see there are two components to any sound, even a stereo sound. There's the sum, which is the center, and then there's the difference. And so what we do is we manipulate that and in the context of the entire mix and try to get every little piece to fit together so that the listener can hear everything and pick it out. And that's what makes a track sound big. It's just these little, and believe me, they are slight adjustments that add up to a lot, okay? Okay, and then another way to create a stereo effect is with tremolo or an auto panner, which Sound Toys has an auto pan. It's called Pan Man, and then there's others on the market. And what this does, it causes the stereo signal to jump back and forth. And you'll hear. I can slow it down here. Now you can really hear it, right? And one bar is actually probably better than quarter note. So that's another technique that can be used and that I have used in the past. And then there are plugins that'll do it. So let's get rid of this tremolo and let's go to Waves again. And let's go down here to the S1 Imager. Now this one here, we're starting out with just the normal file here. And then you can actually take and increase the width, like so. So there are just plugins that will just flat, you throw them onto your channel and it will make your sound wider. And then let's take it down to mono so I can just sweep through mono and then to stereo here. So now that's mono. Now you can see how it's starting to sound kind of coursey because it's actually getting a little bit overdone there. It's outside the speakers almost. Okay, so let's just play that in context here. And then of course I could add let's add a medium reverb to that. I'm just keeping in mind that there's still a lot of mixing to be done on this track. Okay, so I've kind of given you a rundown now of all of the considerations that go into a track, mixing a track with keeping your focus on stereo width. And then once you decide what you're going to do with your track or what I'm going to do with this track, once you make that decision, then that's when you start pulling out the tools and applying the techniques that I showed you here, my top 5 here that I use: the chorus, the reverb, the delay, the Haas effect, mid-side EQ, panning. Well, actually, there's 6 there, isn't there? And then plugins, other effects plugins that are specifically designed for creating stereo width that are very effective. Like that last one I just showed you, that S1 stereo imager from Waves. So part 2, I've kind of given you a taste here of what we're working with, the techniques, the areas that you need to focus on when you're dealing with mixing your own track, and what I'm going to focus on when I mix this track. Part 2 will be, I will come back with this track already done, and I've got effects down here too, with all of the techniques and all of the mixing done, and I will review everything that I've done, and it's going to sound quite a bit different, trust me. It's going to sound quite a bit different. In fact, I have a bounce of this actual track here. Where is it here? Okay, so here it is. Okay, so that's the way this track initially sounded when I used it for a demonstration on a video years ago. And it was kind of just sloppily thrown together in like 3 hours. And I did a video that covered the introduction of Logic 10.4 at the time. It's one of my older videos. And so I'm just going to finish this track and demonstrate mixing techniques with the focus on stereo width using stereo widening techniques. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up. And if you want to be notified for part 2, hit subscribe. And thank you very much again. Have a nice day.